Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a truly fascinating philosophical text. It was written by Su Feng, and it maps out the core tenets and, honestly, the very strict behavioral expectations of a unique community known as Lifechanyuan. So let's jump right in. Because whether you're totally fascinated by alternative community structures or you're just kind of curious about different blueprints for human happiness, the text we're unpacking today offers a highly specific, totally uncompromising guide for how to live.
To navigate this worldview, we're going to follow a simple roadmap today: the purpose of life, the Chanyuan celestial, radical responsibility, and finally, the tour guide.
All right, part 1, the purpose of life.
So how exactly does this text define the ultimate foundational objective of our existence? Well, according to the source material, absolutely every system humanity creates has to answer this one massive question. And we're not just talking about religious doctrines or grand social structures here. The author explicitly states that even your everyday activities, like running a local business, traveling, or hosting a community event, all have to be measured against one singular objective. If a system doesn't serve this ultimate purpose, the text argues it's deeply flawed.
And that singular objective, quote, "The purpose of life is to pursue joyfulness, freedom, and happiness." What's really wild here is just how absolute this claim is. The text asserts that anything aligning with this pursuit corresponds to what it calls the Tao of greatest creator. It's aligned with humanity itself and the very definition of civilization. On the flip side, anything that deviates from this pursuit of joy and freedom is considered disordered, imperfect, and literally a betrayal of civilization. So joy isn't just some nice little bonus in this philosophy, it is the fundamental metric for a civilized existence.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Chanyuan Celestial.
Okay, so if pure joy is the ultimate goal, who are the folks actually trying to achieve it? These dedicated followers are known as Chanyuan Celestials. The text describes them as the most cultivated and civilized people in human society. They strictly follow the instructions of historical sages, specifically naming figures like Christ Jesus, Buddha Sakyamuni, and Lao Tzu. And their ultimate goal? It's incredibly ambitious. They're aiming to reach heavenly states described as the 1,000-year world, the 10,000-year world, or the celestial islands continent. But here's the catch. Reaching those heavenly states requires a very, very specific mode of behavior right here on Earth.
The text draws a super strict line in the sand here. On one side, a true Chanyuan Celestial has a fundamental duty to actively bring happiness, freedom, and joy to absolutely everyone they encounter. We're talking parents, partners, coworkers, neighbors, the whole shebang. On the other side, the text is completely unforgiving. Anyone who brings worry, trouble, suffering, crises, or even just starts a quarrel is definitively not a Chanyuan Celestial. In fact, if you bring suffering to others in the family, the text states you've outright betrayed the values of Lifechanyuan and the greatest creator's Tao. Imagine trying to apply that absolute zero-tolerance policy to your own family Thanksgiving.
Which brings us to Section 3, radical responsibility.
So how do you maintain the zero-tolerance policy for bringing negativity into the group? By enforcing an intense, absolutely uncompromising focus on self-reliance. The text leans heavily on that famous old proverb, "God helps those who help themselves," but man, it takes it to an extreme level. The source explicitly mandates that individuals must swallow their own pain. You have to pay off your own debts by your own efforts. You must walk your own path. Why? Because the community space is meant purely for reality, goodness, and beauty. Literally nobody is allowed to pour their worry, their complaints, or their negative moods into the shared family space. Doing that is viewed as polluting the purified spiritual and mental spaces of the other members.
The author actually splits human behavior right down the middle. On one hand, you have the ideal follower, an independent, unhesitating, promising stronger who endeavors bravely. On the other hand, there's what they call an indolent, helpless weaker who just indulges in complaints. The text lays it out clearly. If you endeavor bravely, I will give you a helping hand. If you indulge yourself, then there is nothing I can do. It's a philosophy that completely and totally rejects the idea of shared misery.
To make sure this actually works, Lifechanyuan lays out some rock-solid interaction boundaries. First, individuals are viewed simply as companions traveling life together, rather than a group bound by heavy obligations or liabilities. Second, it's strictly forbidden to steal, grab, or expend the energy of others. Third, because you have your own brain on your own shoulders, you are entirely responsible for your own words and actions. If you do something foolish, you eat the bitter fruit yourself. You absolutely cannot blame anyone else. And finally, with very few exceptions for specific named sages, there's a strict rule against unwanted directing, educating, or lecturing of others. You can share, you can encourage, but you cannot try to control or dominate your companions.
All right, let's look at our final section, Part 4,
The tour guide. We've seen the rules for the individual, right? But how do these strict rules of radical independence shape the actual Lifechanyuan organization itself? Interestingly, the source defines the organization mostly by what it is not. It is strictly a spiritual and mental homeland. It explicitly states it will never be a political or religious organization. Because this entire philosophy is built from the ground up on individual responsibility, the organization refuses to impose responsibilities on anyone, and in turn, it refuses to be responsible for anyone. It advocates a value system, sure, but it will never manage or monopolize a person's life.
And this anti-hierarchy vibe extends directly to the top, to the founder, Zhu Feng. He defines his identity strictly as a tour guide of human life. He completely rejects the titles of boss, leader, or even master. Think about it. A tour guide simply offers a map. Whether the tourist actually chooses to follow that route is totally up to them. The text stresses that the tour guide has zero right and zero qualification to compel anyone to do anything.
Towards the end of the text, Zhu Feng lays out 3 strict stances to really solidify this point. First, as we just discussed, he acts only as a guide with no coercive power. Second, he promises total consistency. The organization's deeds must strictly accord with their published words, specifically in texts like the Chanyuan corpus. And third, he guarantees absolute transparency. There are no secret, stealthy activities happening behind closed doors. Everything is claimed to be fair, upright, and totally open to the scrutiny of science, logic, and human monitoring. He even says that if you see activities happening outside of their official websites, it definitely isn't them.
Which really brings us to the ultimate conclusion of this entire worldview. In the end, the organizational structure essentially dissolves right back into total individualism. The text states that everyone must face the greatest creator directly. You are responsible only for yourself. You don't need to be responsible for other Chanyuan Celestials. You don't need to be responsible for the Lifechanyuan organization, and you certainly do not need to be responsible for Shui Feng. The burden of your life and the pursuit of your own joy rests entirely on your own shoulders.
As we wrap up this explainer, we're left looking at a real paradox, aren't we? A tight-knit spiritual family where the foundational rule is that you must carry your own weight so you never burden anyone else with your pain. It invites us all to ask a pretty heavy question. Can a community truly thrive purely on radical self-reliance? Or does true spiritual companionship inherently require sharing our burdens? Where exactly does the line between personal responsibility and community support truly lie? I'll leave you to chew on that. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the frameworks around you.